All right, let's jump right in. Today we are diving deep into a really specific topic, the methodology for understanding God's names and attributes laid out by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Sālih al-Uthaymīn. Now this might sound a bit academic, but trust me, the way you approach this can change literally everything about one's faith.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about why this is considered a pillar of faith. Then we'll get into the actual foundational principles of this method. We'll look at the big debate between distortion and apparent meaning. Check out the two extremes this path tries to avoid, and finally, land on the path of moderation.
Okay, first up, a pillar of faith. And you might be thinking, why does this even matter? It sounds so abstract. But the thing is, this isn't just some side discussion for scholars. The source material we're looking at makes it crystal clear that this is a fundamental, absolutely crucial part of belief itself.
And this question from the Quran, wow, it's Prophet Abraham talking to his father, and it just cuts right to the heart of the matter. He asks, why do you worship something that can't hear, can't see, and can't help you at all? It really makes you think, right? How can you truly worship a God if you don't actually know who he is or what he's like? Knowing God through his attributes is presented as the very foundation of worship.
So this all plugs into the core Islamic concept of Tawheed, the oneness of God. And according to this understanding, it's not just one single idea, it's more like a three-legged stool. You've got the oneness of lordship, meaning he's the only creator. Then there's the oneness of divinity, he's the only one who deserves worship. And then, crucially, there's this third leg, the oneness of his names and attributes. It's not some optional extra, it's a full third of the entire foundation. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Because the approach of Ahl-us-Sunnah wal Jamā isn't just to say, believe in the attributes. No, it proposes a very specific method, a clear and consistent framework for how we're supposed to approach them. At its heart, the principle is deceptively simple. Affirm what's in the texts. That's it. If an attribute is mentioned in the Quran or in the authentic traditions of the Prophet, then you accept it and believe in it, based on its apparent, straightforward meaning. And to protect that simple principle, the methodology sets up these 4 huge guardrails, 4 things you must not do. You don't distort the meaning, that's tahrīf. You don't negate the attribute entirely, that's ta'til. You don't ask how, which is takyīf, and you absolutely do not liken the attribute to anything in creation, which is tamthīl. These are the essential rules of the road.
This method of just affirming the text immediately puts it at odds with some other theological approaches. And the central conflict really boils down to that first guardrail we just mentioned, tahrīf, or distortion.
Let's be really clear about what tahrīf means here. It's not just any kind of interpretation. It's when you take a text and twist its meaning so far away from what it clearly says that you basically change what was intended, usually to fit a preconceived idea and without any real textual proof.
This slide is the perfect example. The verse says, "And your Lord has come." The Ahl-us-Sunnah methodology says, okay, the text says he comes, so we affirm he comes in a way that befits his majesty. But the people of tahrīf, as the author calls them, argue that it doesn't literally mean the Lord comes, but that the command of the Lord comes. See what they did? They inserted a word that isn't in the original text, and it completely changes the subject.
So, let's zoom out a bit. This leads us to the bigger picture. The author presents the Ahl-us-Sunnah approach as this path of moderation, a way to carefully steer between 2 big extremes that other groups fell into.
On one side, you have the extreme of just flat-out negation. The idea was to exalt God so much that to avoid any comparison with creation, they ended up denying the very attributes he affirms for himself. The logic was kind of like, well, humans can hear, so God can't have the attribute of hearing, because that would imply a similarity.
Then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you've got the extreme of likening, or tamthīl. These folks affirmed the attributes, but they made a critical error. They read that God has, for example, a hand, and they immediately imagined it to be just like a human hand. This directly contradicts the Koran's statement that there is nothing like unto him.
So you have one group denying God's attributes, and another making them just like human attributes. Between those 2 pitfalls, the text presents a resolution, the path of moderation.
This moderate path is all about holding 2 ideas in perfect balance. It's a simple formula: affirmation without likening and exaltation without negation. So you affirm what the text says, for instance that God has a hand, but you do it while firmly believing that it's a hand utterly unlike any created hand, in a manner that befits his majesty.
Now this is the big gotcha question that opponents always bring up.
They'll point to certain verses and say, wait a second, you do it too. You also engage in allegorical interpretation when it suits you. You're being inconsistent.
The author tackles this argument head-on. Take the verse about Noah's Ark sailing in our eyes. The accepted meaning is under our observation and care. Opponents call this interpretation, but the author argues it's not. The meaning is just part of the Arabic language and its context. No one would seriously think the ark was literally floating inside an eyeball. Under our observation is a necessary, built-in meaning of the phrase itself.
So, what this all boils down to is a consistent framework. The final decider isn't what one person's logic says is right, because human reason can be all over the map. Instead, the ultimate guide, the final word for understanding these things, is always found within the sacred texts themselves.
And that leaves us with a final thought. The whole purpose of this methodology is to ground belief about God in revelation, not just in speculation. So the question is, by tying belief to such a strict text-based method, does it really succeed in protecting faith from the shifting sands of individual interpretation and philosophy? That's definitely something to think about.